DevOps is dead, and the companies killing it are the same ones who created it.
Dead? What about all the DevOps engineers out there? So we're breaking down what platform engineering actually is, why IDPs are taking over, and who's already making the switch.
By minute 4, you'll know if your organization needs an internal developer platform. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Platform Engineering Playbook Daily Podcast. Today's news and a deep dive to help you stay ahead in platform engineering.
Today we're diving into the rise of platform engineering, how internal developer platforms are replacing traditional DevOps.
Stick around to the end for this week's headlines. Let's dive right in.
So platform engineering has finally shed its experimental veneer. What started as these isolated attempts by infrastructure teams trying to tame cloud sprawl has solidified into something you can actually budget for, something defensible. And when I look at the landscape now, it feels less like a revolution and more like exhausted pragmatism.
Exhausted pragmatism. That's a perfect way to put it. Because we've all been there, right? ServiceNow tickets piling up, Terraform modules copy-pasted across repos, engineers slacking each other at 11 p.m. about which IAM role grants ECR access.
Exactly. You build platforms because the alternative becomes untenable. Usually somewhere between your third acquisition and your 50th microservice, the whole thing starts to crack. Every squad maintaining its own Jenkins pipeline, its own Ansible playbooks, its own mental model of how secrets propagate from Vault to pods. It's organizational chaos.
And the timing here is fascinating. We saw this crystallize around 2021, 2022, right? When companies were hitting that scaling wall post-COVID digital transformation. Suddenly, everyone had 10x the services, 10x the deployments, but the same size ops team.
The numbers tell the story. Puppet's 2021 State of DevOps report showed that high-performing organizations were spending 55% less time on infrastructure management compared to low performers. But here's the kicker. They were deploying 973 times more frequently. How? They'd abstracted away the complexity.
So walk me through what changed, because DevOps was supposed to solve these problems. You build it, you run it, and all that. Where did it break down?
DevOps succeeded brilliantly at breaking down silos between dev and ops, but it created a new problem: cognitive overload. Developers became responsible for understanding CI/CD pipelines, Kubernetes manifests, cloud networking, security policies, observability stacks. The average developer at a mid-sized company was juggling 15 to 20 different tools just to ship code.
And each tool had its own learning curve, its own best practices, its own failure modes.
Right. I talked to a platform engineer at a fintech last month who put it perfectly. We realized our developers were spending 40% of their time on undifferentiated heavy lifting, configuring infrastructure, debugging CI/CD, waiting for manual approvals. That's 40% not spent on actual product features.
This is where the infrastructure as a product mindset comes in, right? Treating your internal platform like it's a product with actual users who have actual needs.
Exactly. And this is the fundamental shift. Traditional ops teams built tools for themselves, scripts, runbooks, maybe some Jenkins jobs. Platform teams build products for developers. They do user research, they track adoption metrics, they iterate based on feedback. Spotify's been doing this since 2016 with Backstage, treating their developer portal as a first-class product with dedicated product managers.
Coming up, we'll dig into exactly how companies are pulling this off, the technical architecture, the organizational changes, and why some attempts fail spectacularly.
So let's get into the technical meat of how these platforms actually work, because there's a huge difference between slapping a UI on top of your Jenkins jobs and building a true internal developer platform.
Walk me through what a modern IDP actually looks like. What are the core components?
At its heart, you've got 5 key layers. First, the developer portal. This is your single pane of glass. Backstage is the open source leader here, but companies like Spotify and Netflix have built custom versions. This isn't just documentation. It's where developers discover services, spin up new projects, check deployment status, everything.
And underneath that?
Layer 2 is your service catalog. Every microservice, every database, every message queue, cataloged with ownership, dependencies, SLAs. Netflix's platform tracks over 7,000 services. Without this catalog, you're flying blind. Third layer is your golden paths, pre-configured templates for common scenarios. Need a REST API with Postgres? One click. GraphQL service with Redis cache? Another template.
These templates encode all your best practices, security policies, compliance requirements.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Layer 4 is your orchestration engine. This is what actually provisions infrastructure. Could be Terraform, could be Crossplane, could be custom operators, but the key is abstraction. Developers don't write Terraform. They fill out a form saying, I need a database, and the platform handles the rest.
But doesn't that create a black box problem? Developers not understanding what's actually happening?
Great question. The best platforms provide progressive disclosure. Basic users get the simple interface, but you can always drill down to see the generated Terraform, the Kubernetes manifests, the actual AWS resources. It's like driving a car. You don't need to understand the engine to commute, but mechanics can still pop the hood.
What about the fifth layer?
Governance and observability. Every action logged, every resource tagged, every cost attributed. One financial services company I worked with saw their AWS bill drop 30% just from better resource tagging and automatic cleanup of orphaned resources. Their platform automatically terminates any non-production environment that hasn't seen traffic in 72 hours.
Let's talk numbers. What kind of impact are companies actually seeing?
Mercado Libre, Latin America's largest e-commerce platform, reduced their mean time to production from 3 weeks to 30 minutes after implementing their IDP. That's a 1,000x improvement. They're deploying 45,000 times per month across 15,000 microservices.
But that's a massive company with massive resources. What about smaller organizations?
Fair point. The investment is significant. Gartner estimates that building a basic IDP requires 3 to 5 full-time engineers for 6 to 12 months, plus ongoing maintenance. That's easily $1 million annual investment. But the ROI calculations are compelling. If you have 100 developers, each wasting 10 hours per week on infrastructure tasks, at $150K average salary, that's $7.2 million in lost productivity annually.
I've seen platform initiatives fail, though. What goes wrong?
3 main failure modes. First, building for ops instead of developers. Your Kubernetes experts build this incredibly sophisticated platform that requires a PhD to use. Adoption dies. Second, trying to boil the ocean. Successful platforms start small, maybe just standardizing deployments for one language or framework, then expanding. Third, mandating adoption without proving value. The best platforms grow organically because developers want to use them, not because management decreed it.
There's also the organizational challenge. Platform teams can become the new silo, the new bottleneck.
Absolutely. Smart organizations embed platform engineers in product teams on rotation. They do office hours where developers can drop in with questions. They treat platform work like product work with roadmaps, sprint planning, user feedback loops. Spotify famously has their golden path philosophy. The platform provides the easiest way to do something, but teams can still go off path if they have special requirements.
And what about the buy versus build decision? There's a growing ecosystem of platform engineering vendors.
The market's exploding. Humanitech raised $21 million, Port raised $35 million, even Microsoft's getting in with their Azure developer platform. But here's the thing. These tools are accelerators, not complete solutions. You still need platform engineers to customize, integrate, and evolve them for your specific needs. It's like buying Salesforce. You still need admins and developers to make it work for your business.
Stick around. We'll break down exactly what you should be looking for if you're starting a platform engineering initiative, plus the checklist every organization needs.
So let's get practical. If you're a CTO or engineering leader listening to this wondering if platform engineering is right for your organization, here's your decision framework.
Where do you even start? Because I imagine a lot of folks are thinking, this sounds great, but also overwhelming.
First question, do you have more than 50 developers? Below that threshold, the overhead rarely justifies the investment. You can get by with good documentation and some shared Terraform modules. But once you cross 50 developers, especially if they're distributed across multiple teams, the coordination costs start killing you.
And what are the warning signs that you need a platform?
5 red flags. 1. Your deployment process has more than 10 manual steps. 2. Onboarding a new developer to deploy their first service takes more than a week. 3. You have that one person who knows how everything works and everyone's terrified when they take vacation. 4. Your developers are copy-pasting infrastructure code between projects. 5, and this is the big one, your developers are spending more than 30% of their time on infrastructure and deployment tasks.
So say I'm convinced. What's the roadmap?
Start with a platform team charter, not technology, charter. What problems will you solve? Who are your users? How will you measure success? I've seen too many platform teams start by picking Kubernetes and working backwards. That's like choosing a hammer before knowing if you're building a house or a boat.
Give me a concrete example of a good charter.
Here's one from a retail company I advised. The platform team will reduce developer time to first deployment from 2 weeks to 2 hours, eliminate 90% of production incidents caused by configuration errors, and ensure every service meets security and compliance requirements by default. Notice, no mention of tools, just outcomes.
Once you have the charter,
Pick your first use case carefully. Don't try to platformize everything. Maybe start with, every new Node.js API can be deployed to production in under an hour with zero infrastructure knowledge. Build that, prove value, get developers advocating for you, then expand. The successful platforms grow like products, incrementally based on user feedback.
What about the skills gap? Platform engineering requires a different mindset than traditional ops.
Critical point. Platform engineers need 3 core skills. First, software engineering. You're building products, not scripts. Second, empathy. You need to understand developer workflows and pain points. Third, systems thinking, how all the pieces fit together. The best platform engineers I know came from development backgrounds, not pure ops. They felt the pain they're trying to solve.
and organizationally, where should platform teams sit?
Tricky question with no universal answer. I've seen success with platform teams reporting to the CTO, to VP of engineering, even to a dedicated VP of developer experience. The key is they need to be peers with product engineering, not buried under infrastructure or operations. They need a seat at the architecture table.
What about measuring success? How do you know if your platform is actually working?
4 key metrics. Deployment frequency, how often are teams shipping? Lead time, how long from commit to production? Developer satisfaction, yes, actually survey your users. And platform adoption rate, what percentage of new services use the platform versus going rogue? Spotify tracks their golden path compliance religiously. When it drops below 80%, they know something's wrong with the platform, not the developers.
Looking forward, where is platform engineering headed?
3 trends to watch. First, AI integration. GitHub Copilot for infrastructure? Imagine describing what you want to build and having the platform generate everything. Second, edge computing platforms. As applications move closer to users, platforms need to abstract multi-region, multi-edge complexity. Third, platform marketplaces. Internal teams publishing reusable components that other teams can discover and compose.
Any cautionary tales? What should people avoid?
Don't build a platform nobody asked for. I consulted for a company that spent 18 months building this beautiful platform. Self-service, fully automated, technically impressive. Adoption rate, 15%. Why? They never talked to developers. They solved problems developers didn't have while ignoring the actual pain points.
So the key is treating it like a product with actual product management discipline.
Exactly. And here's my closing thought. Platform engineering isn't about technology. It's about leverage. It's about taking your best engineer's knowledge and encoding it so everyone benefits. It's about removing friction so developers can focus on what matters, building products customers love. When you get it right, it's transformative. When you get it wrong, it's just another layer of complexity.
The companies getting this right are seeing 10x improvements in deployment velocity, 50% reductions in infrastructure costs, and massive improvements in developer satisfaction. But it requires commitment, investment, and, most importantly, a willingness to treat your developers as customers, not just resources.
Platform engineering is where our industry is headed, not because it's trendy, but because it's necessary. The complexity isn't going away, we're just getting better at abstracting it, and that's the real revolution. Before we wrap up, let's catch up on this week's infrastructure news. There's a fascinating development from OpenAI. According to Axios, they're positioning themselves as a scientific research partner, not just an AI provider. Their latest report shows ChatGPT usage in scientific research has absolutely exploded, especially in computer science and data science fields.
That's interesting timing. Are they trying to shift their image from being just the ChatGPT company to something more academic?
Exactly. They're actively advocating for policies that promote AI in scientific discovery. It's a smart move. Embedding themselves in the research community could give them massive influence over how AI develops in academia.
Though I wonder how researchers feel about relying on a proprietary platform for their work. Speaking of platforms, have you seen the news about ingress-nginx being archived?
Yes, the CNCF blog just published a piece on why teams should migrate to Cilium. For platform engineers, this is huge. Ingress-nginx has been the go-to ingress controller for years.
The timing is actually pretty generous, though. They're offering both a drop-in replacement with Cilium Ingress and a migration path to the Kubernetes Gateway API. That's way better than just pulling the plug.
And Cilium's eBPF-based approach brings some serious performance benefits. This could actually be an opportunity for teams to modernize their networking stack.
Speaking of reliability, HashiCorp just published a fascinating postmortem about how HCP Vault handled that massive AWS US East 1 outage last October.
The numbers are incredible. 100% uptime for their data plane during the entire regional outage. Their architecture really proved itself under fire.
It's a masterclass in multi-region design. They kept customer workloads running even when an entire AWS region went dark. That's the kind of resilience platform teams dream about.
And here's some fresh CNCF news. Cedar, that policy language from AWS, just joined as a sandbox project. This is big for anyone dealing with fine-grained permissions.
Cedar's approach is really interesting. It decouples access control from your application code entirely. InfoQ reports it's already being used in Amazon verified permissions and AWS verified access.
The verification features are what caught my eye. Being able to mathematically prove your policies are correct, that could eliminate so many security headaches.
Absolutely. With the CNCF backing, we'll probably see Cedar integrations popping up across the cloud-native ecosystem pretty quickly. That wraps up this week's news.
That's our show for today.
If you found this valuable, please subscribe and share with a friend who'd appreciate it.
Drop us a comment with your thoughts on today's topic.
Links to everything we discussed are in the show notes.
And check out platformengineeringplaybook.com for more resources and guides. Until next time.